Welcome everyone to our 10th virtual artist talk in our ongoing series presented as part of Nexicom Presents Fourth Line Theatre at Our Home and our Epic Women's Directing Project, which focuses on the lives and careers of Canadian women working in theatre. So excited to spend some time tonight with the amazing Andrea Scott. But before I do, I have a few things I'd like to talk to you about. First off, I want to acknowledge that I am live streaming to you from Treaty 20 Michi-Sagig territory in the traditional territory of the Michi-Sagig and the Chippewa Nations, known as the Williams Treaty First Nations, which includes Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Brahma, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island. The area in which Fourth Line Theatre is situated is called Nojijiwanon, Ojibwe for place at the end of the rapids. The shores of the Odenabe River, which were a gathering place for Indigenous people. Odenabe or Otonabe means river that beats like a heart. We respect the treaties of peace and friendship and are thankful for the generosity of the Anishinaabe people in sharing their land with us. We would like to pay our respects to the elders, past and present. We would like to acknowledge that the Williams Treaty First Nations are stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters, and that they continue to maintain and carry out this responsibility for those here now and for future generations to come. Secondly, I'd like to acknowledge our season sponsor, Nexicom, for their continued support of Fourth Line Theatre, and Exit Realty Liftlock as our major sponsor, and Supporting Roles Interactive Training for being the sponsor of our Epic Women's Directing Project. Thank you all. Some housekeeping notes. I just want to let you all know that your audio is muted. If you'd like to submit a question to Andrea or myself, we'd be happy to answer your questions during the Q&A at the end of the talk. To ask a question, simply click on the Q&A button on the menu at the bottom of your Zoom video window. You can type the question and then our host, Lindy, will collect them and give them to us during the Q&A. Also, please be aware that if you mistakenly exit the webinar or have any technical difficulties, you can simply re-enter the way you came by clicking on the Zoom link that we've sent you. You get back the same way you came. Be sure to follow our social media, e-blasts, and visit our website for registering for upcoming events. Next Tuesday evening, I will sit down with the multi-talented Bo Dixon for the next Artist Talk series. You can also visit Fourth Line Theatre's YouTube channel to view all of our virtual events after the live presentation. And now I would like you to join me in welcoming Andrea Scott.
Oh, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me. I have to divulge that I am having this crazy allergy attack. It started about 24 hours ago. So if I have to blow my nose or sneeze, I'm just thank God we're in different places, I suppose. That's a good thing. But I'm having some sort of crazy reaction to my house. So that's why if I sound stuffy.
Okay, I think that there was a movie about that called Safe.
Oh, Lord. Well,
with Julianne Moore.
Oh, yeah. I think this is about the fact that the filters in my furnace were black when we just pulled them out 10 minutes ago.
Ooh.
I know. So thanks so much for joining me. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. The last time I saw you in person, I think it was when we went to an outdoor show at Christmas at Christie Pitts.
Oh, so cold. So cold.
It was
it was the story. It was Martha.
Yes.
The story, and it is they're not called what they used to be called anymore. The theater company. I can't think. I'll think of it in a second.
I can't remember either.
I know. They used to be Theater Columbus. They are now Lindy. Maybe
Boots? Common Boots.
Common Boots Theater. Lynn Slotkin already got right on it. Thank you, Lynn Slotkin. that was, I love their shows. I love that show. That was a cold, bloody night.
That was a cold night.
Well, the last time I really remember being with you, and I don't want all my stories to start with how much Prosecco I consume, because that doesn't sit well, but we were at the Duke of York. After being on an OAC jury.
Yes.
And Pat Bradley sprung us early. And that was like where I really got to know you as a sort of a human being and an artist. I had such a good week with you on that jury.
That was 2000 and I think 15, because that was the year, because while we were on the jury, I found out that my play Better Angels, a Parable, had gotten in.
Right. You had to recuse yourself because of something at Solar Stage. Don't tell anyone I told you.
So much stuff, so much going on. Such history we have.
We do, but
No.
those two times are not the two times. So we were with Grant Ramsey. Remember, that's when you met Grant
Mm-hmm.
at the Duke, and we had such a nice afternoon of prosecco drinking.
Prosecco on that beautiful patio, and we will do it again.
Touch wood, touch wood. I know we will. I believe in us. So tell me where you are right now. I am intrigued.
Like when you say where I am, do you mean literally or do you mean
Like your physical.
existentially?
Well, I think we have to do both. Let's start with like the concretized. Where is Andrea Scott filming, coming to us live from?
I'm in the annex. I've been living in this apartment for 24 years. And it'll be 24 years in May. And I have been here since I went to graduate school at U of T for theater for my master's in Toronto.
How is that possible? I would have just assumed were you 10 when you moved into that apartment?
I'm a baby.
Yeah, I know you are a baby. So you're in the annex. You're actually you're spitting distance to the Duke of York.
Yes, I am.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And existentially, where are you these days? How are you doing?
You know what? I am I hate saying this because it feels like such a cop-out, but I am very busy these days. So I'm a little bit all over the place. I'm a little bit fractured, trying to do many things for different people and be different individuals for all of them. So I'm teaching playwriting at University of Toronto, and I'm, writing a new play that I am trying to get to the Alberta Theatre Projects because we have a reading for it in May. I just finished Born Afraid, my play that was inspired by Long Day's Journey into Night. And I'm also working on multiple TV projects. So it's been interesting. It's been an interesting year.
I have to unpack that.
Okay.
So let us start at the beginning. So I am curious, are you born and raised in London, Ontario? Did I get that right?
I was born in Toronto and we moved to London when I was 2. My parents lived at Oakwood and Eglinton area, I think Oakwood and St. Clair, actually. And then at the age of 2, they moved to London, Ontario, because that's where a lot of my dad's friends lived. So that's where I grew up and went to public school and high school. And then I went to a technical high school. So I was planning to become a television and radio broadcaster. I wanted to be like Connie Chung. So that'll give you a tip to my age. And I ended up getting seduced by theater and decided to go to school for theater. But the first play I ever saw was at the Grand Theater, directed by Martha Henry, called A Warm Wind in China, starring Philip Aiken.
Oh.
Yeah.
Am I giving feedback there, or is it okay?
I don't hear feedback.
Okay, good. So I'm curious about, did you do the whole, I'm curious where that interest in theater comes from. Was there already an interest, or was it that moment of seeing Phil Aiken on stage?
No, it's so, when I think about it, it's not like there was this moment where I realized I wanted to do theater. I really don't know where it came from, because I think that I ended up taking theater in high school just because I had a spare. I had a spare in grade 10 or 11, I think, and I was wandering the halls and a teacher was like, "What are you doing? Come take my class." And that's how I started. It wasn't something that I ever thought about. And then once I started taking theater classes in high school, I would read plays that I found in the library. And I do remember that one of the first plays that really resonated with me was For Colored Girls Who Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough by Ntozake Shange. And that's when I started to think, maybe I don't want to be in television broadcasting. I think I'd like to be an actor instead.
So if I was to tell 13-year-old you what you're doing now, that you're a writer, that you're writing for plays across the country, plus you're writing film and television, would your 13-year-old self go, "Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense"?
Yes. Because before I wanted to be in television and radio broadcasting, before I wanted to be in theater, I wanted to be a writer. My mother instilled a love of reading in me. So I read a lot of books, and a lot of the books that my mother ended up giving me were books that she got used, and a lot of them were British. So I was reading a lot of Enid Blyton, anything by a British writer I was reading. And so I also developed a lot of love for England and wanted to be English and would do that obnoxious thing that children would do and launch into a fake accent. Peppa Pig did not start it. I'm just going to tell you right now. So I wanted to be a writer. And I tried valiantly, and I had English teachers who made it very clear that I would never be a writer and that I wasn't very good. And so I gave up on that idea and focused on wanting to be in television and radio broadcasting and being an anchor. I wanted to go to Ryerson and become, like I say, Connie Chung, because she was the only woman of color that I could look up to. There was no Oprah at that time. So that's what I wanted. And then I got seduced into theater and ended up doing that instead. And that's how I got here. But for me to become a writer actually isn't all that surprising, because I had entertained that idea for a very long time.
And are you a journal person? Like, are you journaling all the time?
I used to be somebody who many journals. My mother supported. I was going to here, but I fell off of it after, I think, 16 or 17. But there are like binders and binders of journals in London at my dad's place. So I stopped in university, I know that for sure. And then when I went to university, I went to university for theater, but it didn't occur to me to write plays. It just occurred to me to continue to read them because I wanted to be an actor.
Right. Now, so when you were at, is it HB Beale Secondary
Yep.
School? Is that where you went in London?
Mm-hmm.
Were you like doing like lead roles? Like, tell me about your theater career as an actor there.
It was London. So it's so funny when I talk to people and I'm like, yeah, I was in The Crucible. And people say, oh, what role did you play? And I always go, Abigail. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, no, it was London, Ontario in the 80s. I was Tutu Buff. I mean, I never got a lead role. I mean, it was the 80s. It was London, Ontario. I always played supporting roles. I never got leads. That was just not ever going to happen. I auditioned one year, or I went to sign up to audition for what year it was, I don't remember. And the theater professor teacher said, there's no black roles, Andrea, so there's no point in you auditioning. So I learned at an early age that there's only so much that is available to me.
Well, I want to come back to that in a minute. Let us come back to
His
that.
name is James Patterson. So if anybody wants to look him up in London, Ontario, you should, and say, Andrea told us that you said this. He'd probably deny it and say he never said that, but whatever.
Right. So then you're only doing, I'm curious then, you're only doing extras or smaller roles, not principal roles. What makes you think, or what makes you think there is a place for you, a world for you at theater school? Because you went to U of T Arundel, right, for acting?
Yep. Yes, I did. I just loved it. It felt like the right fit for me. And I was aware that there were certain things that would just not be available for me in London. But Toronto, the possibilities are endless. And, I auditioned for theater at Ryerson and McGill and York and U of T. And I can't remember. I know I didn't get into Ryerson, but I got into York, and I think I got into McGill or Concordia, and I got into U of T. And I really liked what I was seeing at Arundel, so that's where I ended up going.
That's awesome. And so when I first knew of you was 2003, I think, at Can Stage. Is that not right?
Oh, my goodness. Oh my goodness. Omnium Gathering. My goodness. I know that when I was in theater school, I made a dream. I created a dream for myself, and it was, all I want to do is get on stage with Fiona Reid. If I can work with Fiona Reid, I'll be done. Like, that's my goal, to work with Fiona Reid. And then my first professional production ended up being with Fiona Reid and Nigel Shawn Williams and Ashley Wright.
Yeah, Ashley Wright.
Yeah. And Brenda Robbins, like
Hardy Lynham.
Yeah. Amazing.
So was that your first professional gig?
Yeah.
And so what was that experience like? David Storch directed you. I think Breda Garricky designed it.
Yeah. We realized that when I was in Stratford as being mentored by David Oster, that we had met before, and that was weird. Because we had always felt like we had met each other before, but we could not figure out how. So to find out that we had actually worked together on that show was pretty amazing. My experience in Omnium Gatherum wasn't great. Wasn't great.
Okay, don't have to say anything. But I remember that it was the challenge of the Revolve.
Oh, the Revolve. Yes.
How to incorporate the Revolve, and then everybody's dietary issues, because it was a meal had to be served, right?
Yes, we had to eat 2 meals a day for 8 shows. and everything was ice cold, even though it doesn't look like it is when the audience is watching it. And occasionally there'd be, snafus. A wine glass would fall over and shatter, and then everyone would have to be, pretend it's not happening.
Well, I love the script, so I'm not surprised you wanted to do that script. Yeah, I'm not sure if the show was all that successful. Did you imagine that you were gonna, like, coming from high school in London and what you had faced there in terms of roles, but then you go to Arendelle and you're gonna have access to all the roles at Arendelle?
Yeah, I when you go to, what theater school is like. I mean, you get to play all kinds of amazing roles. Um, and I did some classical theater and got to wear some great costumes, but at the same time I knew that I wasn't terribly interested in doing classical theater. My objective was never to work at Stratford or Shaw. I knew I wanted to do contemporary work because I just didn't feel like there would be a place for me in those places. So I was happy to do the roles that I was given at Arendelle, but I didn't know what was going to happen in my future. So I just was very open to what was going to happen. And after I graduated, I then went to, I did my master's. I actually decided that I wanted to keep learning. So I continued and did my master's in theater at U of T, which was one of the best things I could have ever done. It just helped me absorb and approach theater in a very different way. Dramaturgically, intellectually, I could deconstruct a script a lot better. And I was very grateful that I had the opportunity to do that. So it's funny, like I moved into the apartment, my first apartment, when I went to graduate school, which was one street over on Madison, and then lived there for a year and then moved here, and I've lived here ever since.
And so was there a between sort of 2003, you did your master's in the middle of that, and 2012, is it 2012 where you do Rocks, Papers, Sisters? Is that the first?
Yeah. Because I had written a one-person show called Damaged, inspired by my friend who was transitioning to being female, Lily. And she was the one who said, you should write this, because I'm never going to write this. Even though their story was fantastic, she was like, I think you should find a way to do this creatively. And so I did, before we, knew more about appropriation of voice, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the one that got me an opportunity to perform it. And I also ended up, like, the following year, had Miranda Edwards was in it. She performed it. It was a one-person show, and that got me a little announcement in Now magazine by John Kaplan.
So is Damage different than Controlled Damage, or is it a
Yes.
build?
No, completely different. Damaged is about being trans. It was about male to female, talking about how they went from having a girlfriend to not being sure if they wanted a girlfriend to realizing that they did want a girlfriend, and then the perspective of the girlfriend and then the girl that liked the person before they transitioned. So I wrote that. And then Control Damage is completely different because it's about Viola Desmond, and Eating Pomegranates Naked is a completely different, like, they're all very, very different stories.
So is there a moment that you can remember where you're like, I need to, like, is it just Lily saying you need to write this, or were you already starting to write before that? Is there a moment when you're like, I am ready to start journaling again, writing again? Like, when does that all happen, Andrea?
I think I had gone to one too many auditions where I felt that I was a prop to advance somebody else's story as a Black character. And I kept thinking, I think I can write better roles than this for other women. I almost feel like I was deciding to kind of bow out a little bit and wanting to create roles for other people. That is what had happened. Is Damaged, yes, was the one that I wrote, and I performed it once, but I realized it really wasn't something that I wanted to perform anyway. And then once I realized, because I got a letter from an artistic director when I applied for a grant for it, that I had no right to tell that story, that's when I decided to shelve it and start something new. And I had seen a movie called I Am Slave, about modern day slavery at TIFF, and that inspired me to write Better Angels, a Parable. That's when I started writing that. Now, what's funny about that is that was not the play. That was not my first produced play. My first produced play was Eating Pomegranates Naked, which I mean, I'm not really sure even where that came from, because it's about two married couples and a single having a dinner party, and then a big secret comes out and it just breaks everybody's truths and lies, and instability's open. I don't even know where that came from. I've never been married. I've never had kids. I never wanted kids. I have no idea where I came up with this play, but it's the first play that got me attention.
There is a huge sound coming when I talk. It sounds like a creature. You can't hear it, but I can hear it, and I think they can hear it on YouTube. We're going to pause for a second. I'm going to go out and come back in because
Okay.
it's getting worse. Okay. Stand by and see if I can fix it. I will be right back.
Okay.
Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes, sounds better. I'm not hearing the sound,
Sound
Kim.
like a monster every time I talk.
Oh,
Oh my gosh. Hello again.
You know, that's happened to me where I would speak and I'd be, it was a different call and it was the same thing. I was like, do you hear that? And they're like, I don't hear anything. And I'm like, I'm hearing like a, oh.
Yeah, that's what was happening. It's never happened before. Anyways, I don't hear it now. Lindy doesn't hear it now, so we're going to proceed. Okay, so look at I want to talk first about Better Angels, a Parable, because I think in 2015 you were getting ready to do that show as part of SummerWorks. Yes, so modern day slavery, which I think you told us about it at our coffee breaks, lunch breaks. Can you explain that to me? Because I was listening to it today on Play Me, the podcast on CBC as well.
You want me to explain Better Angels, a Parable?
Yes.
Okay, so Better Angels, a Parable, really, it came up because of that wonderful film I saw about a woman who, when she was a very little girl, was kidnapped by basically slave traders in sub-Saharan Africa in the 1980s. So this was something that happened when I was like a kid. So she was a child, they showed up, they raided her village, they grabbed her, and then she was sold to a family in London, England. And she was living in this house of a very well-to-do family, and they treated her like a slave. They kept her, I think, in a closet or in a basement, and they never paid her, and she was not allowed to speak. She was never allowed to leave. And when I saw this film, it inspired me because I thought, how often could that possibly happen in a country like Canada? Like when I think of London, England, you know, very well-to-do, very metropolitan, that could happen in Toronto. That could definitely be on my street. And so I started to imagine, what if something like that was happening next door to me in the annex? And what would her story be? And came up with the idea of a woman named Okosia who moves here to work for a very nice yuppie couple, a Black man or a biracial man and his white wife, and take care of their kids. But I also wanted to pair it with the Anansi story and the idea that they think that they're going to put something over on this young woman who they think is just an ignorant African girl, but she is wily and she is smart and she has learned from the trickster, and she learns to take their insecurities and the lies that they're telling about each other and turn it on them so that she ends up escaping.
I am fascinated by your mind. I'm just, so you didn't know if this is happening in Toronto, which one would suspect it could be, yes?
Yeah, definitely.
And so tell me where you first got it produced, who dramaturged it, how did it get to the stage?
Well, it's so funny because once I realized that you could apply to get grants to help you with your work, which I learned because of Be Current, I tried to get a grant for it so that I could get support working on it while I had regular jobs, and I couldn't get any money for it. And I just kept working on it. And then I believe I ended up getting it into the Cahoots playwright unit when I was in their playwright unit in the hot house. Ironically enough, I didn't get into the playwright unit at Cahoots because of Better Angels. I got in because of another play called Swings and Roundabouts, which was a TYA play that I had written about an Afghan girl who starts dressing like a boy in order to go to school and hide and take care of her family. And then when her family moves to Canada, she doesn't realize that she can start dressing like a girl again and keeps dressing like a boy when she goes to school. When she goes to school, she becomes friends with these two kids, Joy and Isaac. One wants to be a beauty pageant contestant, one wants to be a fashion designer, and they all learn from each other that they can be themselves. And I wrote that and I submitted it to Cahoots. And at the time, they were in between artistic directors. And so the artistic director who read it was Kawa Ada, and he loved it. And he was like, I never see stories about Afghan children. I think this is wonderful. I think this is wonderful. But then he left, Marjorie came in, and Marjorie was like, this is a lovely play, but we don't produce TYA. Do you have anything else? And I said, well, I have this other play called Better Angels, a Parable, if you'd be interested in that one. And she was like, sure. And so I worked on Better Angels, a Parable with her for one season. And then she asked me the unit a second continue because I had already works and they gave me great notes. I would have to say to everybody out there who is a writer and a creator who submits to all these contests, if you don't get in, sometimes you can ask for notes and they will help you and give them to you, which is what I did. And I got great notes, great constructive criticism about what was lacking and what they felt was overwritten. So I had another year to work on it, and I did. And then I submitted it the next year and it got in. So that was in 2015. And I remember thinking, this is a great play. This is a great play and it will do well. I just need the right director. And originally the director was supposed to be Sabrin Rock. So Sabrin was going to direct it. I wanted Payson in it, and I wanted Sasha Cole, and I wanted Okosio Amoadem. And what's so interesting about this story, and I have told it before, is that I had come up with this story for like a couple of years before for Better Angels, a Parable. And I already knew the names of my characters. And I was at a Whole Foods near my house in the annex with Sharissa Richards. And Sharissa and I were walking through the cheese aisle, and I picked up some cheese and I was like, oh, this is the cheese that I mentioned in my play, Better Angels. That is so weird. And I look up and I see this woman and I say, Sharissa, that woman over there looks like my character. Like I imagined that my character Okosia looks like her. And Sharissa's like, oh, I know her. We go to school together. And I was like, oh, she's like, I'll introduce you. So she walks over and says, this is my friend Andrea. She wants to tell you something. And then Sharissa went off and did her own shopping. And this woman is like, so you've written something and you think I'd be good in it? And I'm like, yes, I've written this play. It's called Better Angels, a Parable. It's about a young woman named Okosia. She was like, I'm sorry, your character's name is Okosia? And I was like, yes. And she's like, that's my name. And I was like, that's crazy. She's like, how did you come up with that name? And I'm like, I just like it. I just really like the name. She's like, okay, where is your character from? And I said, she's from Accra, Ghana. And she was like, I'm from Accra, Ghana. And I'm like, this is bizarre. And as I started describing the character, she's like, this is weird because I am an actor. And I was like, no. She's like, no, I go to York. I go to York for theater. And that's how Sharissa knows me. And I was like, well, it sounds like I'm writing this play for you. So let me get your number. And of course, this is all so silly when you think about it, because this happens all the time where someone's like, hey, I'm going to put you in a show. But like, this was 2 years beforehand. And I said, I will put you in this show if it ever gets produced. And she was like, okay. And then I got into SummerWorks, and she was like, I think the third call that I made. And I was like, are you free this summer? Because it got in. And she was like, absolutely. And then Sabrin ended up getting Obia Opera, so she couldn't direct my play. So I decided to ask Nigel Sean Williams if he'd be interested. I like a big swing, by the way. I like to ask the most probably inaccessible person possible for my work, and then I work my way down. And I sent him the script, and he was like, I would love to direct this because I understand this story, because he's also Jamaican. And that's how we did it. And I was like, I will be producing it. Don't worry. I can pay you. He also negotiated on his rate. I was like, it's SummerWorks, Nigel. I was like, everyone's getting $500. He's like, Andrea, I think I'm going to need a little more. I'm like, I'll see what I can do. And I think I ultimately raised $6,000 so that I was able to pay everybody more than $500 each, and I was able to pay him more than what he asked for. And I sent out invitations to all the artistic directors and let people know about it, and created an ad campaign, and made sure that people knew about it on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and rest is history. The play won production of the year and was completely sold out by the second day.
So, okay, so many questions for you. First of all,
Yes.
was that your first produced play then? The first thing that had ever been on stage professionally? That was your second?
Yeah, Eating Pomegranates Naked was the first one.
Was the first one. Okay. So, and was it at SummerWorks as well, or where was it?
Yeah, it was at SummerWorks, and it won the RBC Arts Professional Award because I did a lot of producing and got a lot of sponsors through that one too.
Okay, so tell me quickly about how you know how to produce and to raise $6,000 for SummerWorks. Tell us, please. Share your secrets.
I was gonna say beginner's luck, but I don't think that's really what it is. I think that my past experience as a salesperson, most people in high school, when they get a part-time job, they get a job working at McDonald's or as a waitress or something to that effect. I got a job working in sales. Like, I worked at a shoe store called Friedel. I worked at Lady Foot Locker. I worked at Jean Machine. I worked at Levi's, and I learned how to sell. I learned how to present a product and point out the features and the benefits, hand it to the person who you want to purchase it, get them to touch it, understand what the quality is, and then let them decide. Give them a product that they didn't know they wanted, and then give them a fair price for it. That's it.
But it's so interesting to me that you can do both things. Like, you can be a writer now who's just exploding, but you can also be you have that producer brain, because a lot of people don't have those two things together.
Yeah, I don't know how it happened. It's just, I love selling. I'm actually very, very good at it. I've always been like the top salesperson at all of my jobs. And I really do, I credit this woman who trained me at Lady Foot Locker. She just explained to me that don't sell, just present their options, the features, the benefits, make sure you know everything about your product, and let them make a decision. And make sure that when you engage with people, you are sincere, and to be genuinely curious about who they are, and then walk away, and they will come back to you. And that has served me really, really well, is being well educated on my product and learning how to present it to people without them feeling like they're being sold to. And I just took that approach when it came to my work with my plays. And that when I'm writing a play, I'm writing something that I believe in sincerely, but do other people have an interest in it? Are there other people out there who would engage with this and relate to these characters? And then I take off my creator hat, put my producer hat on, and think, okay, how do we sell this product to a large audience? How do I get a theater interested? How do I get an artistic director to show up? And that's really my springboard, and that's how I have kind of operated for the last, I guess, 12 years. I also am not easily defeated. Like, rejection is a given in our life. So that probably is because of my professional life as an actor, is you're not going to win them all, and it's not going to have anything to do with you. You put your best out there. That's all you can do.
I like it. So tell me about how and where Eating Pomegranates Naked comes from, because that's your first professional.
Yeah. It's like, I used to have this part-time job working for Kitchen Stuff Plus, and like when they first started, and I had a coworker who, I remember when we were walking back to the subway, and I don't know how or why she was talking about this, but she mentioned that she and her boyfriend had just found a new place, but they didn't have any dishes, and they had a pomegranate. And so they decided to eat it naked so that they didn't get anything messy. And I just thought Eating Pomegranates Naked is quite possibly the best title I've ever heard. And I wasn't a writer then, I was an actor. And I just kind of filed it away as something that I wanted to work into something I did one day. And then I read an article, it was a Dear Abby column, where somebody wrote in and said, Dear Abby, I think I messed up. My best friend had a dinner party and I drank too much. And when I went to the bathroom, I did what everybody does. I snooped through their medicine cabinet. And when I opened the medicine cabinet, I found a pregnancy test, and it was positive. And when I went downstairs and I said, congratulations, her face just fell because she had lost the baby. Do you think I can ever get this friendship back? And Abby was like, absolutely not. But for me, I was like, that's the beginning of a play. So I decided on writing a dinner party scene where there are kind of tensions simmering underneath the surface. I find the concept of motherhood, expectations on women, especially women of certain ages and certain races, to be very restrictive. And I think it's really rude to ask somebody, do you want to have kids? And it happens so often, especially since you won't know if maybe that person has had trouble conceiving. And I wanted to examine that. And like Black women, I think are just automatically conceived of as caregivers and, you know, taking care of children, taking care of other people's children. So why wouldn't you want to take care of children? So I had a friend who had told me that even though she was married to her high school sweetheart and they had always said that they wanted children, now that she was married, she loved being married, but she didn't want kids. And she was hoping he would never bring it up. And I thought, okay, that's another story I could put in this play, and was inspired by her. And so those were my characters. The woman who loves her husband and loves being married, thought she wanted kids, decided that she didn't, and what that means to the relationship. So the pomegranate image ended up really working really well, because when I look at a pomegranate, it makes me think of fertility. I had a character in the play called Anar, and Anar in the Persian culture, it means grenade. So Anar is pomegranate, which means grenade, and it is Anar who goes up to the bathroom, finds the pregnancy kit, brings it downstairs, and everything explodes at the end of Act 1, which brings us into Act 2. And then Act 2 is quieter, and it's two-handers of everyone having very quiet, intimate conversations with their partners on, what do you want? I thought you wanted this. And my tagline was, we all want to be lied to. And that was my thesis, is sometimes people will suppress the reality of their relationships and what they really want in order to protect a relationship, because they love the person so much, even if it means they suffer in the event of not getting what they want.
So tell me about your writing process, if you can. Where do you write? How do you write? Is there a way you structure your work? Like, I'm curious about what your writing looks like, or your process. Can you talk about that?
Sometimes it will just be a line. Like a line will come through my mind and I'll write it down, and I will kind of have a rough idea of who the person is who says it. And then that will turn into a monologue, and that monologue I will then build around it, and the people around it, and the characters who are affected by it, the antagonist, the protagonist, the satellite individuals, and then it just builds from there. I'm teaching at U of T, I'm teaching playwriting, and one of the things I have tried to really impress upon my students is you have to be somebody who is insatiably curious about everybody. You just can't be focused on what's happening in your own mind and how you would handle it. How is that person over there handling it? When you look at a photograph in the newspaper, instead of focusing on the person who's principal, why don't you look at the person who's kind of in the background, who is watching what's going on? What's going on in their mind? What's going to happen when they step out of the frame? And who's their family? And how can we find a way of relating this story that you want to write to them? How can you make that specific story universal to everybody else? And that's really how I have been able to write 14 plays, which I'm astounded by myself.
Literally, I am being a moaner again. I've got this sound in my computer again. I'll see what Lindy says. Is it terrible, Lindy, the sound?
It isn't right now. It did come back for a moment there, but it does sound better now. You might want to leave and come back again.
Let's just see, how is it right now? It seems okay every time you unmute yourself, Lindy.
Oh, interesting.
Anyways, okay, so tell me about then the actual structure of writing. Do you write just scenes upon scenes upon scenes? Do you worry about structure? Do you write backstory, monologue? Like, where do you get to sort of the final draft or the production ready draft?
Oh goodness, it takes years. It takes years. With Controlled Damage, that was supposed to be a TYA play. And it was supposed to be about a grandfather and his stamp collection and his favorite stamp, which was the Viola Desmond stamp, and him telling a story about her to his grandchild. And that ended up being scrapped completely. So it comes from the most unlikeliest places. But yes, I mean, I have a lot of notebooks. Do I have one near me here? Like, oh, like they look kind of like these with the rings. I love these. I will get a new one and then I'll write at the top, Eating Pomegranates Naked or Better Angels or Swings and Roundabouts, and just start jotting down ideas, characters. How old are they? What year were they born? What is their name going to be? And I generally like to use the dates of when they were born in order to figure out what their name is going to be. So, you know, if I know that the character is 43 in 19 or 2019, then they were probably born near me in a certain time period, which means that their name is going to be like Karen or Susan or Jane. So I use that. Or sometimes I am being symbolic, which is what I did with Eating Pomegranates Naked. And then that can sometimes like build all in and of itself of creating the character. So character is action. So who is this person? What do they do for a living? How would they react to a certain situation that they are put in? Would they be a victim, a bully? They be in that situation? Are they the ones who would speak up, or are the type who would just kind of hold back? What was the relationship like with their parents? How do they feel about children today? Do they feel like they are just being coddled? I love all of that stuff, and it all finds its way back into my scripts in some way. And then eventually I will sometimes just write like standalone scenes, and then eventually just kind of thread them together. And then I will look at it and see what I need to do. Then I will put it away and start something else. And then I'll take some time and then I'll go back and then finesse it. Then I will find somebody that I respect and ask them to read it.
Okay, I have some questions. So my first question is, are you writing all of that in the ringed binders, or that's the research and then you're writing scenes on?
All of it. And in between all of that, I'm also thinking about the business of the play. How am I going to market this? What's the hashtag going to be? What kind of poster art do I think I'd like to use if I want to market this? That's also in there as well. If I'm going to have 5 characters, how much is that going to cost? What am I thinking of here? Am I thinking ITA? Am I thinking DOT? How much do I need to raise if I'm going to get a grant? If I'm going to do a workshop, how many days do I need? Do I want 3 days? Do I want a full week? Am I going to get a dramaturg? Do I just need just the actors and me around a table? That kind of thing. So that's also taking place as well as me thinking about, where was this character born? How does that influence their journey? Where do I want to see them start their journey, and where are they going to? What do they want? What do they need? I have all that stuff, like all that, very technical stuff that can sometimes just be embodied in a statement, in like an argument that they have with their partner or with their employee or with their boss, all of that.
So detailed. It's amazing. So I want to ask you, is there a moment, you've got 14 plays now. I want to get to sort of where you're at now, because your kind of career as a playwright has exploded. But is there a moment where it shifts and you start to be able to see yourself being a full-time playwright? I want to talk a bit about your Joe job when I knew you in 2015, because it is fascinating. but is there a moment, Andrea, where it starts to shift for you?
I'll be completely honest, and that is that in 2018, I decided just to pivot to TV. I felt like I had really put a lot of work into theater. And that, yes, I would say that my visibility and somewhat success was a little bit meteoric, in that I had started writing when I was 39. And I'm not going to be able to give the year because right now I'm having a hard time remembering what year I was born. Anyway, I started writing and then got a grant, and then got into Rock Paper Sisters, then got into the Obsidian Theater Playwright Unit, and then got into Summerworks. It all happened very, very fast, and I had to just keep up. And so it was Damaged, Eating Pomegranates Naked, Better Angels. Better Angels ends up winning, production of the year, does well, makes me money. I'm able to pay everybody. I'm thinking, okay, people are going to start wanting to develop work with me, or I'm going to have the opportunity to work with theater companies, but that didn't happen. So I didn't really know what to do next. I knew that because I had won the production of the year, that I would be given the opportunity to produce Don't Talk to Me Like I'm Your Wife the following year, which I did. So I ended up producing Don't Talk to Me Like I'm Your Wife at SummerWorks in 2016. I raised $10,000. I know it's a lot of money. It's a lot of, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at my notebooks, but yes, I was able to raise $10,000 in order to put this play on the way that I wanted it done, so that everyone could wear what I wanted them to wear, and the set looked exactly the way that I wanted, and everyone got paid well. And I also was running a very, very focused campaign to get on the cover of Now, and had been for 18 months. So when I got the call, or the email, I should say, in June from Now saying, we would like you to be our SummerWorks cover, I was like, mission succeeds. Awesome, I did it. So I was able to do that, and the play did really well. I wasn't happy with it creatively. I think it needed a dramaturg, and I didn't have one. And then I got invited to be in the Stratford Playwright Retreat, which was a joy and amazing, and I loved every minute of it. And I did feel like I was a playwright. However, I wasn't being given any opportunity to showcase my work in any way unless I produced it. And I felt kind of tired. I was starting to feel really tired. And that was 2016. And 2016 was a terrible year because of, Trump, and the world seemed like it was on fire, and there was no love. So I decided, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. But I was working on another play called Almost Belonging, and I was doing it through Tarragon, but that didn't go anywhere either. And I just wasn't sure what to do. But then I started to hear that the Viola Desmond bill, that she was possibly going to be put on the $10 bill. And I had already been working on Control Damage the year before, and I had just set it aside. It had been sitting on my hard drive for like 12 months. Maybe, yeah, by October, it had been on my hard drive for 12 months. And then I was like, this is what I'm going to work on. I'm going to work on this. You know what? I've done my best. I have put on several plays. They've all done well. I've gotten press on all of them. I've made my money back. Nobody is producing me. This is my magnum opus. This is going to be my big play, Control Damage. It's big. It's a big play. And I got into the Grossmorn playwrights residency in Newfoundland, and while I was there, Emma Tibaldo was really wonderful and was like, you need to write the play you want to write instead of thinking about how much it's going to cost. You need to take off your producer hat and stop thinking about the financials. And I immediately thought of something that Bob White and Angela Cimolina had told me and all the other playwrights a few months before, which was, write big plays. We want more playwrights to write big plays. We get it. The two-handers, they're cheaper to produce, and it's easier to produce and tour it around, but we'd love a big play with lots of characters on stage. And I remember saying, I respect you all very much. Thank you very much. However, it's expensive to put on a play with more than 5 actors. And they're like, we know. But, if your play is good enough, somebody will produce it. Trust us. Not that they were saying it was going to be them. They're like, there is a place for it. And so when I was in Newfoundland, I wrote the play I wanted to see. And instead of it being 4 characters, it was 8. And they were playing 23 characters instead of 6. And then it got into Springworks in Stratford, the festival that happens in October. And as soon as it got in, I was like, okay, we're doing this. And it's like SummerWorks, but it's not like SummerWorks. And it was hard to raise money because it was such a short period of time between me finding out in, I think it was March or April, and then getting people to agree to do this for a little amount of money, and also travel to Stratford and have to sleep over because it was going to be a 2-day endeavor. But I was able to do, I still had money in my business account from Don't Talk to Me Like I'm Your Wife. And I had gotten a grant for Control Damage, so that was in the account as well. And then I did an Indiegogo, and that Indiegogo helped cover paying for everyone to get to Stratford, put them up in an Airbnb, and feed them. And that worked out really, really well. And while it was there, Andrew Lamb drove in from Toronto because he wanted to see it. And afterwards, he took me for a glass of wine. He was like, this is an amazing play, and I think this would be great at Neptune. And I was like, I love the idea of it going to Neptune too, but I feel like regional theaters really don't like to produce the work of outsiders, especially people from Toronto. Like, I mean, it's a real thing, and I completely understand. And he was like, no, I think you should try. You should try. And he's like, and I know Jeremy, I'll see what I can do about talking to him. Now, I had already submitted something to Neptune earlier. Oh no, it wasn't Neptune, it was Eastern Front Theater. And they were like, sure, they were like, we would be happy to help you workshop this play. And it would all be by not even Zoom, it was just by phone. And I was in Stratford when it was happening, so I was like making phone calls to them, and we were like dramaturging over the phone. And then in May of 2018, I flew to Halifax so that I could see a reading of it, and it was like a 10-minute excerpt, but I paid for a trip to Halifax so that I could see a reading of it. And Jeremy wasn't there because he was here auditioning for, I think, The Color Purple, so he didn't even see it. I mean, it's so funny, but I remember flying back and thinking, what did I just do? Did I just waste a lot of money and time? And a little voice said, no, you've got to actually hear the voices as you wanted to. And I was very, very happy. I was like, I really think this is a good play. And part of the reason I was in Stratford was I wanted to learn from David Auster how to be a better producer and how to produce a big show. I knew how to produce a 5-person show or a 3-person show, but 8, I wasn't sure how I was going to do that. And I wasn't sure how I was going to get that much money, because with my number crunching, I was thinking 110, 125,000 to run it. I got to figure out how I'm going to get that money. And I was thinking about it. And then I had problems with my eye. Something strange happened with my left eye, and I had to have surgery. It's called a vitrectomy, which, short story, the vitreous gel in my left eye built up and poked a hole in my macula. So I was seeing triple, and it was terrible. It wasn't painful. It was just very disorienting, and I was very dizzy. It was not good. And I just couldn't work, and I couldn't write. And I found out from the surgeon that I would have to have a very simple surgery, but that the recovery was brutal, that I would have to lay face down for 3 weeks straight, because they were going to be inserting an air gas bubble in my eye between the macula and the eyeball. And I'd have to lay face down so that the macula could heal. I know, it's gross. But anyway,
did you remember you had this operation and you had to do all that recovery?
Yeah, that was in 2018 after I got back from Halifax. So
I'm curious. They end up tell us a bit about, give us like the log line for Viola Desmond and why she's important, because I'm curious about that, and I definitely want to jump onto you. I want to hear how you got onto TV writing. So tell me about Viola Desmond, Controlled Damage, and I also want to talk about your Nightwood show with Nick Green.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then I want to talk about your film career. But tell me about Viola Desmond and why she's important to us all.
I mean, the Viola Desmond story came about because Carrie Costello, who's married to Pablo Felices Luna, who runs Manitoba Theatre for Young People, she had approached me in 2015 and asked if I could write a short play about a heroic Canadian woman that most people didn't know a lot about. She wanted to provide theatre for young girls to see high-achieving women. And I didn't know who she wanted me to choose. She said it was up to me. I had to do my research, and it could only be 8 minutes long. So I did some research, and I found out about Viola Desmond. And I remember reading it and being like, why don't I know about this? And that was 6 years ago. And so I sat down and started to write. And it's exactly like I have said to my students. I was like, I sat down and just came up with a monologue from the perspective of somebody who was sitting in the theater.
Not Viola or somebody else? Somebody
in the theater was there. This was something I imagined. What if you were there that night and saw what happened to her? And how do you feel about you not doing anything about it? And I wrote that monologue. And from that monologue, I started to build a play. And then I was like, this is not 8 minutes. This is already 17 pages. And then Carrie wrote us, me, and Michaela Washburn was also one of the writers, and said, I'm sorry, we didn't get our funding, so I'm sorry, the project has been shelved. And I wrote back and said, I think I'm going to keep writing this if that's okay, because I think there's a story here. And that's when it became a TYA play, but then it became a play about all of us. because I started to feel a kinship to this tiny Black woman who made a decision that she was going to do this thing regardless of what anyone was telling her she could or could not do, which was what happened to her.
And she bought a ticket for a person of color to sit upstairs in the movie theater, but then she sat downstairs, but she was, is that what it, and then was charged?
What happened? Well, she wasn't from New Glasgow, so she didn't even know that that was an option. She bought a ticket thinking, I'm buying a ticket. She didn't know that it was a ticket for people of color. She just thought it was a ticket and went and sat where she usually sits, which is close to the screen on the main level, because she had really bad eyesight. So she didn't even know that what she had purchased was to be upstairs. And when somebody came and tapped her on the shoulder and said, I'm sorry, you can't sit here. And she said, no, I have my ticket. And she was like, no, that ticket's for upstairs. And it's more, no, the person personally said, at first said, it's a more expensive ticket to sit down here. And she tried to give them the money and they said, no, no, no. People like you don't sit down here. You have to sit upstairs. That's what happened. And she just decided she wasn't moving, because in Halifax, it wasn't the same as it was in New Glasgow, where it was Jim Crow, but more explicit.
Wow. And
So, yeah.
that show then became a show that was it done last year? When was it done at Neptune?
This time last year.
And sold out before it opened, yes?
Yes, yes.
Amazing, amazing. And but right before that, you did a show for Nightwood. Can you tell me a bit about that? And with your friend Nick Green, right?
Yeah, it's Nick Green and I had met at a party through Indrit Kasapi and became friendly. And I believe what happened was Nick went to see Don't Talk to Me Like I'm Your Wife and really liked it and felt that we had the same kind of political aesthetic about how we approach theater and incorporate our political ideas and character. And this was the same year that the Black Lives Matter protest had stopped the parade. And
they stopped the Pride Parade, to give people context, right? They sat down in Pride Parade.
The Pride Parade. And he said that he went to a lot of like private parties where he would hear some very disturbing opinions from some of his friends and peers and thought, there's a story here. I would like to write it. So he asked me if I wanted to go for dinner one day, and I was like, sure. So we went for dinner, and I had a feeling, I was like, this is going to be someone who wants to pitch an idea to work together. I don't know if I'm going to have time for this. But when he told me the idea, I was like, sure, that sounds interesting. He said, I like the idea of a straight Black woman and her gay white male best friend, who end up having a falling out after going to that particular parade. And that even though they've been best friends since they were kids, they realize that they don't see eye to eye on everything. So it started off as just that. And then I believe, yes, Sky Gilbert was able to get us a little bit of money. And we did a reading at the Pride, during Pride, Genderqueer, I think it's called, the festival's called Genderqueer, the following year in June. And it went really well, but then we got into Nightwood to develop the play even further, and it changed, and it became more of a meta-theatrical commentary about the creative process between a Black woman and a white gay man, and that's what kind of broke it open.
And did you guys perform it?
We performed it as a reading at the Genderqueer performance in June, but no, Nick really wanted us to perform it at Buddy's. And I had said to him, I was very, very honest. And I said, listen, I am not acting anymore, not for any reason. I am trying to pivot to TV. And I need to know that I'm not going to be held back by a contract where I'm acting in anything. I need people in the television industry to take me seriously. And if you tell them that you're also an actor, I feel like they won't take me seriously if I say I'm also still an actor. So I am bowing out of theater right now. So no, I'm sorry, I do not want to act in it. And that's how we ended up with Moniz Peter and Adrian Shepard-Gowinski, who were excellent.
And who directed it?
It was Andrea Donaldson and Sedina Fiati.
Oh, so they directed it together. That's what I thought. So, okay, so you decide, I mean, is it just as easy as deciding you're going to be a screenwriter and a TV writer, and then you just snap your fingers and you do it? Like, how does this happen?
For me, it did.
Okay, so tell me.
I'm not like, in no way would I ever say anyone else can do this. I'm not going to be like, it's easy, you can do this. But like once I make my mind up about something, I just do it. And so because of the eye surgery and I had to be in recovery and I couldn't move and I couldn't do anything, I thought this is my time to start brainstorming some ideas for TV shows that I can write and come up with some outlines. I had a meeting with Floyd Kane. Floyd Kane is the executive producer and showrunner of Digstown. He had been interviewed by, I think it was the Globe and Mail or Toronto Star, about his show having a Black female lead, which was unusual in Canada. And so I was able to get to his agent and say, can I maybe meet with you and talk to you about this? Because I am a young Black woman who is a playwright who's looking to break into television. How do I get there? And he sat with me for 2 hours and gave me a lot of great advice and told me about what pilots I should read, what scripts are good for structure. And so that's what I did. Is I downloaded a bunch of podcasts about screenwriting and television, structure, what a writing room is like, what a showrunner does, and what's considered a good show as opposed to a popular show, what's the difference between cable and network. And that's what I did. I recovered from surgery. It took much longer than I expected. In August, my bandages came off. I was allowed to sit up. I didn't have to lay face down anymore. But what I didn't know was going to be an issue is that I'd be blind in the left eye for another 5 weeks. So I couldn't see out of my left eye and I had to take it slow. I work out at the JCC in my neighborhood, Jewish Community Center, and I have been working out there for many, many years. And I have a little coterie of friends, and they're all, I call them my gentlemen, and they're Jewish gentlemen over the age of 70. And basically they adopted me a few years ago because they used to see me every single day, come to the gym, work out, do my thing, go upstairs, go to second cup, sit down with my notebook and write. And I did it every day. And they saw me and they would be like, what is her story? And one day one of them came up to me and was like, who are you? What are you doing? And I was like, okay. I was like, I'm a writer. My name is Andrea. And eventually they would see me and they'd walk past me and they'd be like, come sit with us. And I'd be like, I can't, I'm writing. And they're like, come sit with us. And I'd be like, I can't, I'm writing. And one day one of them came over with a piece of chocolate chip banana bread. And I was like, okay. And then I became part of their crew. So in September of 2018, one of them said, you should meet Carl. And I said, who's Carl? And he's like, Carl's an agent. And I'm like, I have an agent. He's like, no, he's a TV agent. You should talk to him. And I was like, well, I don't have any TV stuff to give him. He's like, it doesn't matter. And one day he brought Carl over and me we were both working out. We were all sweaty. And he basically did a meet cute. And he was like, Carl, this is Andrea. Andrea, this is Carl. You two should get to know each other. And Carl was like, the boys talk about you all the time. I did a little research. It sounds like you have a respectable career as a playwright, but I don't represent playwrights. But do you have some TV ideas? And I said, I do. And he's like, okay, swing by my office. My name is Carl Lieberman. I am the head literary agent at Characters. I'd love to meet with you. So I was like, okay. So 2 weeks later, he and I are sitting in Balzac's with his assistant. And he was like, pitch me. And I was like, okay. And I pitched him 3 ideas that I had been thinking about while lying face down. And he said, I can sell all of these ideas. When can you get me a sample? When can you write me a pilot? And because I didn't know anything, I was like, 2 weeks, which is crazy. It actually took me 3 weeks to write my pilot. And he, wrote me back after I sent it to him. And he was like, for someone who's never done this before, this is a very good first try. You need a little help on structure and formatting. And he's like, but I think we can work with this. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I'm going to send this to Coverage, which is a department at Characters where they go through all the inconsistencies and tell you to fix them. So while that was happening, I was like, I'm going to write him another pilot. So I wrote another pilot about a completely different topic and sent it. And he was like, same criticism. You need help with structure. And I was like, okay. And he was like, you should probably go to the CFC. He's like, that would probably be good for you. And I was like, I'll think about it. I mean, it's $6,000 and you can't work for, I think,
Canadian Film Center.
Canadian Film Center. I was like, I don't know. I'll think about it. And then, Christmas happened, New Year's happened. 2019, Happy New Year. My friend Sean Raycraft, who I went to high school with, is in Toronto visiting because he's working on a TV show, Coroner. And we go for tea. And he says, listen, I think it's great that you've written 2 one-hour pilots, but showrunners are busy. I've seen your plays. I know your work. You should just write something short. Write a half-hour comedy and use that as your sample. I think that's your key. And I was like, okay. So that was on February the 2nd. And I went home and I outlined an idea that I had. And then for 2 weeks, I worked on it. And when I finished it and sent it to Carl, and he wrote me back an hour later, and he was like, this is the one.
And what is it? Can you tell us?
Oh, yeah, it's called Bad Habits. It's a half-hour dark comedy about a young, well, not about young, a Black woman who has been a nun at a convent who decides on her 48th birthday that she's going to leave the convent to look for the baby she gave up when she was a teenager. So it's a dark comedy. She ends up having to live with her criminal attorney sister and non-binary niece. They live next to somebody who they think might be a serial killer. And it's the one that got me meetings, basically. So after February, I ended up having 13 network meetings with like E1 and CBC and New Metric Media and Sienna Films. And everyone seemed really keen on it, but nothing happened. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. In the meantime, I also won the McGee Diversity Screenwriting Award because of another one of my scripts that they liked. And I got paired with Marsha Green, who I was kind of fangirling over anyway. And she helped me with my other script, which I then pitched to E1 and CBC. And even though they weren't interested in it, they came up to me and they were like, that was amazing, because I basically acted the whole thing. And they're like, you know, you've got it. You've got a great voice. And I was like, thank you. And then I ended up doing Control Damage a few months later in Halifax. And while I was there, I was very happy to have Kelly Nestruck say that it was a harder ticket to get than Hamilton. I'm like, you can't pay for that. You can't pay for that kind of advertising. I mean, at the time that he wrote that, it was already sold out. So it just gave it a nice luster. And then when the show ended, I came home on the 24th. I was like, I can breathe now. I was going to be announced as the playwright in residence at Tarragon in a few weeks. And then the pandemic happened. So
now what is happening with these incredible screenplays and things? What is happening?
I can't tell you everything, but in June of last year, my agent, Carl, said, I got you a job as a story editor on The Porter, about Black trained porters. And it starts in a month. And I was like, oh my goodness. So it was a 15-week contract, Monday to Friday, 10 to 4, sometimes 10 to 6, where I used to call it being a high-level secretary, but not really, because you are taking down everything everybody says. So you have to be a very fast typist and accurate, and then contextualize it, create headings and titles and index, and then submit it at the end of every day to all of the network executives and all of the writers and showrunners. But at the same time, you are also expected to be creatively present. So if they say, Andrea, what do you think about what we're doing here in Act 3? What do you think we should add? Well, and they want to know, like if you're in the room and they ask you a question, they want you to give them a real answer. What I brought to the room was the fact that I have already written 2 plays that had a lot of historical context in it. And since the Porter was set in 1922, 24, I was able to speak to Blacks in Canada at that time period because of my work on the Viola Desmond play. So at one point, someone was talking about the war, World War I, and well, what if this particular character runs away from his camp and they catch him and he just gets put in jail? And I was like, well, actually, if you go AWOL, you're shot at dawn. And they're like, how would you know that? And I was like, it's a thing. I know a lot about Canadian history and World War I. And I became the person that they'd be like, Andrea, do some research for us. Find out how many suits does a Black man have in 1922? And I'd be like, okay, I'm on it. And I'd be like, well, they'd have a funeral suit and then they would have their other suit and they would never wear their funeral suit for anything else. And they'd be like, wow, that's so interesting. Why do you know that?
So what was your title on the Porter then?
Story editor.
Wow, that's amazing. So I just maybe blink once. Will not till I ask the question.
Okay.
Will will we see something about bad habits at some point? Maybe just look to the left if we might.
Oh, I can tell you, Bad Habits is actually has not been picked up. It is the one that everyone talks about. Like my meeting with the CBC last year was amazing, but it was so funny because like the people in the room, they were just like, oh my goodness. And that thing that happens on page 4 where she says, and then whatever it was, and they're like, so funny. Oh my goodness. We're never going to produce this because it's just not our thing, but you are good. I remember just being so elated. And then I was like, oh, okay.
But something else that you've written is going to happen at some point, but you can't tell us.
I'm working on something else through Sienna Films because they got such great feedback from the Porter about working with me. And also Sienna Films really loved Control Damage. Like just, they loved it. And so they're looking at projects for me through that. So I'm working on one thing. They have me looking at another thing. I have an interview for something in Paris on Thursday. I'm being considered for another thing I found out today. It's a lot. It's great. It's a lot because I'm also teaching university. So I'm trying to do it all. I'm tired.
It's amazing. And I think what's interesting is that you have approached, like I talk to actors about this a lot, that they have to think of themselves as their own business, like
Yeah.
they're the CEO of their own business. You are the CEO of Call Me Scotty Productions, right?
Yes, I am.
And so you do have that CEO mentality, but you're also this extraordinary writer. I think that's what makes you kind of a magical combination.
Thank you.
I
I'm a
totally think.
unicorn.
I want to ask you what kind of dramaturgy you like, because I know dramaturgy can be so complicated for writers and it can muddy the waters. But I'm curious about what works for you and what doesn't.
I will say that the dramaturg, okay, because I worked, the dramaturg I worked with the most, and it was so many years ago, was Marjorie Chan. And I think that a dramaturg that asks you a lot of questions is a great dramaturg. A prescriptive dramaturg doesn't work for me. Maybe for other people it is. I don't like being bullied. I don't like being ridiculed. I want you to ask me a sincere question so that I can think about it, go away and come back and make a change. And not all dramaturgs work that way. So I would say that Marjorie Chan was amazing. I did get to work with Bob White, but not as much as I would have liked to. And I'm hoping that we can work together on something in the next year or two. I mean, with the way the world is going, who really knows? But somebody who respects that I know more than people, like I think for a long time, I don't know if everyone always realized that I was smarter than they thought I was.
I think people have not realized this about you, right? They have what's the phrase I'm looking for? Not taking you for granted. I'll think of it in a second. They
It's a weird kind of underestimating.
underestimated you. Thank you. They've underestimated you. Yes.
Yeah.
That you were lighter weight. That you were lighter weight than you are.
Yeah, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that you've met me. A lot of the people in the theater community have met me, and I'm very small. Like I really do believe this makes a difference. Very small. I'm very smiley, very friendly, and I don't think anyone thinks that I am an intellectual heavyweight, if you will, and that there are a lot of cogs moving up here in a way that they aren't thinking that they're moving. And my view, my lens through which I see the world and as a writer is actually quite dark. I call myself a fatal optimist, which is a term I learned from Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I believe in the best, but I sometimes I'm not surprised by the worst in humanity. And I like to write like that, which is, I think, why like Nigel Sean Williams and I work together so well as director and playwright, because he also likes to see the light and the dark in characters, which he's able to bring out in a way that doesn't feel pedantic and obvious. And that is how I write my characters. I don't believe people are one or the other thing. And I think that when it comes to me and people meeting me and assessing who I am, there might be an assumption that maybe I'm a little more of a lightweight than I actually am. But also there is something to be said about being very clear and serious about your point of view and how things are going to go. Like there's somebody in my building who sees me in the backyard having cocktails all the time in the summer. And she's like, there's two versions of you, Andrea. There's your fun, happy, great to hang out with. And she's like, but when you're back here with your notebook and you are working, you are not to be trifled with. It is so obvious that there is a very different Andrea that gets things done. And yes, I'm a businesswoman. I'm an athlete, and I have always felt that is how you need to take yourself seriously. You can be an enjoyable person to be around, but the work is the work, and hard things are hard. And sometimes it means not being able to hang out with as many people as you would like to. You have to stay home and you have to work on this script, and you have to do your research, and you got to be hard on people. I'm hard on myself. So if I'm hard on myself, then I'm probably going to be hard on you. Probably not as hard as I am on myself, but if I disagree with you, I usually am disagreeing with you not out of ego. I'm disagreeing with you because I have a reason, because I have thought it through. I think of everything from a three-dimensional perspective, very 360. I am always thinking not just of the script. I'm thinking of the actor and the director and the production and the money and the marketing and the sponsors. I'm always thinking of that. And it has served me well. One of the things that I say now when people ask how I got to this point is I stopped listening to people who gave me advice, especially unsolicited advice. There was a time when I would go and say, what do you think I should do in this situation? And the advice I'd get would be terrible, and I would ignore it, and then I would be successful. And I was like, wait a minute, some people don't know what they're actually talking about, but they know how to be presentational about it. I'm going to do what I need to do. And at least when it fails, I can say it's all on me.
I like that. Okay, so I want to ask you a question. You talked about the Viola Desmond stamp and that controlled damage was originally going to be about the grandfather talking to the granddaughter about the stamp. But tell me about you and stamps, because did you just in the last year finally give up your Joe job that has something to do with stamps?
Yes, I work for the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. And also the Vincent Graves Green Foundation for Philatelic Research. They were a combined company. And I left in 2019. Actually, I left in June of 2019 after being there at the time. I left 2019, so 6 years. 6 years. 6 years? Yeah, because I started in 2013.
And did you like stamps before you started with them, or did you start to like stamps working for them?
No, I love stamps. I love stamps. I've always loved stamps.
How? What? How has this happened?
Because I loved writing letters, and I still do. So I didn't just like having stamps to put on a letter. I like to have the prettiest stamps to put on a letter. And I just like the artwork and the history. And I used to collect stamps when I was younger. And every month I go to the Canada Post and look for what the newest stamps are. I actually just bought 3 books of new stamps. I wanted the new Lunar New Year stamps, which is like a special issue for this year because it's all of the last 12 years. So every year I usually buy a sheet of the stamps of whatever year it is, year of the ox, year of the pig, year of the snake, all of that. This time when I went today, they were sold out. That's never happened. That's never happened.
Okay, I'm going to look in Millbrook for you and see if they have any.
And right now in the United States, there's an August Wilson stamp that I would love. I wish someone would send that to me. So yeah, stamps are kind of my thing. And most people who are very close to me will know that because they get letters from me and they get letters covered in all kinds of beautiful stamps.
I wanted to ask you what your folks think of it all. Are they both alive? I don't know this.
Yes. My mother lives in Mississauga, and my father lives in London, Ontario. My mother is great. She's quite overjoyed at where I am now because she's watched me. My mother has seen me go from, being in the Crucible in high school to theater school at U of T and acting in The Kink in My Hair in the television show and been in multiple commercials. I've been in many, many commercials, to then transitioning to being a playwright and a producer, been able to sit in an audience and see my plays, have a copy of Now magazine with me on the cover, and hold on to a published play with her daughter's name on it, and she's overjoyed. And what's happening with the TV stuff makes her very giddy. And I'm very happy that my parents have been alive to see it. My father is 77, and he is showing the early signs of Alzheimer's, so he doesn't understand my life at all, but okay.
Do you have advice that you give young writers? Is that fair? Is that a fair question to ask you?
I try not to give advice because everybody's journey is different. Everybody's journey is different, and some people can handle rejection better than others. And I handled rejection well now. I think my biggest piece of advice has always been just be curious about everything and everyone, and read everything. Read newspapers, read magazines, find articles on the internet, read plays, all of the plays. Don't just read the plays that speak to your race or gender or identity. Read The Dead White Men. You would be surprised. Like, I had this conversation with a friend who was very against reading or seeing anything by dead white men, but then we saw All My Sons at Stratford, and it just blew her mind. And I was like, see, like, I mean, yes. If you can find the humanity and you can find something that resonates inside of you that has nothing to do with your absolute identity, that's great writing, and it lives through time. And that's the kind of writing that I strive to do. So you need to start seeing people as just individuals and write from that perspective. And then you can like start to craft it using perspective, individual perspective. Like my latest play that I'm working on called Born Afraid was inspired by Long Day's Journey into Night by Eugene O'Neill, except I'm writing it from the perspective of a West Indian family in Toronto, in Little Jamaica, as it's eroding and disappearing. And it's about the loss of identity when you decide to engage in progress. And yes, it is inspired by Long Day's Journey into Night, which is about an Irish American family and a mother who has an addiction to opium, I believe. But I am not writing necessarily from that perspective. I'm writing from the perspective of the daughter, because I'm making it a daughter and a son instead of two sons, and the pressure that young Black women are under in West Indian families to be everything and to be completely selfless and put yourself second, and the stress that puts on you. But you're also supposed to be excellent and do your job well and find a man. It's just a lot.
Wow, that's amazing. I don't know if I even want to ask you about this, but I guess I feel like it's kind of an elephant in the room if I don't talk about what's happened since May of last year with George Floyd and the explosion of the maybe more of a recognition or a more mainstream recognition of Black Lives Matter and racialized injustice. I mean, where are you living with all of that? What is it? What is the time since May and June of last year been like for you?
Unfortunately, as I said, I am a fatal optimist. I do believe in the goodness and kindness of others. However, I don't see racial inequality going away anytime soon. If anything, I think some people are doubling down. I think when somebody like myself does a hashtag for a great show and say hashtag Black excellence, and somebody who I don't even know writes back and says all lives matter, I realize there are some people who you just can't reason with. And I feel like I need to not get into the defensive and fight with those people all the time, because I'm not going to change their mind. I'm not going to change their mind. I believe you need to be so good they can't ignore you has been how I have approached my work. I'm aware that when people look at me, they see a Black writer, and I am a Black woman who is a writer. I always make sure that all of my plays have a lot of people of color in it, and that race is tangentially a part of what's going on in the play, but it's not always about the racism, because the racism, it's embedded in everything that happens in my life, and you just learn how to live with it without it defining everything that you do. Otherwise, you're angry all the time, which is what I was when I was in high school. Back then, it wasn't called being woke. It was just being aware. You know, I was listening to Chuck D and being like, yeah, fuck the power. I was like, I hate white people. And then I got to a point where I was like, this is not healthy. I live in London. I'm surrounded by white people. You know, you read a lot of James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni and Maya Angelou, and you develop a mindset sometimes that can be hard to live in all of the time. Being angry all the time was not serving me, but that anger lives in me at all times, and it comes out in the right places, in the right plays, and it's in my scripts as well, in my TV scripts, and how to just negotiate, walking that fine line of how to speak to people when you know that they don't think that you deserve to be there, that they think that the reason you're there is because of Black Lives Matter trending, that the reason you got this job is because now Black people are getting more work. And I was like, listen, somebody said that to me not too long ago. And I was like, I've done very well as a playwright because I produced my own work. But at the same time, I haven't been produced in Toronto. I mean, Every Day She Rose was me and a white man. But have I had any shows produced in Toronto by any of the mainstream theater companies? No, I have not. Have I had meetings with them saying, let's produce you? No, I have not. So this idea that me being Black has now opened up all these doors in theater in Toronto, or just in general, is not true. My work gets recognition and is going to get produced because it's good and because it will bring in patrons, because it's always going to be about the bottom line. And we always need to remember that. It's always about the bottom line. Not saying that racism doesn't exist, it is, but I want to run a corporation one day. This is not like, I'm in the second chapter. I'm in the first chapter of my life right now. I'm loving that I've done all this in theater, and it has definitely opened some doors for me in the TV industry, but my objective is running a company, a big company, so that I will have a say in the content, because I believe that it's not enough just to put the actors in front of the camera or on stage. You need to have the creators being people of color as well, so they can control their own narratives. And that's what I want.
Well, I have a feeling that when you put things out there in the world, they then happen for you. So I think you've just put that out there. It's probably going to happen. I'm not going to say goodbye yet, but I know I'm mindful of time, and I want to see if Lindy, I suspect there are questions. You are amazing. I knew you would be amazing. I didn't know how amazing you would be, which means I was underestimating you and thinking you were not as heavyweight as you are. I am wrong. You are awesome. Lindy, do we have questions for the incredible Andrea Scott?
We do. Hello.
Hello.
We have our first question from Lynn, the wonderful Lynn Slotkin. Says, we've heard a lot from playwrights who talk about the lens they want to view their plays. Do you care about the lens by which your plays are viewed, or do you prefer that the plays be viewed with an open mind? And thanks for the wonderful work.
Thank you, Lynn. Yes, I prefer people watch my plays with an open mind. I mean, we don't know how people are, what they're coming from when they see a play. We don't know what their situation is. It's like, for me, revisiting a play that I read 5 years ago and I really liked it, and then I read it now and it just resonates in a whole other way because of the experiences that I have had. I believe that we really need to understand that everyone is coming from somewhere different, and it's true, everyone is fighting a battle you're not seeing, and when they read your play or see your production, they may be getting something from it in a very different way than the person sitting next to them. And so come to my show with an open mind. I'm not trying to teach you anything. I don't want to be a pedant.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And from Mary Lynn, she asked, could you describe what it was like seeing your actor portray Andrea in Every Day She Rose?
Oh, Moniz, man, you know what? I thought she was very good. But I will say, I didn't see what other people saw. My mom came to the show, and afterwards she was just like, Mike, did she follow you around? She had all your mannerisms. She had the way you spoke, the way you use your hands, everything. She was incredible. Sometimes I forgot it wasn't you. And I'm like, really? But I heard that from a lot of people. So I was like, okay. So that's what I look like to people. That's interesting. Okay. Okay, cool. I don't mind. I don't mind.
I like that.
She's exceptional. Yeah.
What motivates you to push forward in such an intense industry?
Nobody has a story like mine, and nobody has a voice like mine. So yeah, there are a million stories out there, and there's a lot of hardworking writers, but nobody is going to tell a story the way that I do. And I realized that I had a unique voice in how I told my stories and how I write my plays when audiences, people standing in line for my plays, I'd never seen before. And I think that says something about your work. When your friends come to see your show, that's great. You love it when they support you. But when you find out that 90% of the people standing in line for your play in 30-degree weather in August are there because they're really interested in seeing your work, and then you get a standing ovation afterwards, that is extremely validating. It's like, maybe I am good at this writing thing. Maybe I should believe in myself. And that's kind of what's kept me going, is you can talk yourself out of anything. You really, really can. We don't live in a society where boosting yourself up and saying, I am good at this is actually encouraged because it's seen as boastful. I don't believe that it is. I think that if we don't validate ourselves, why should we expect anybody else to? Because they can also withdraw that and say, you're not that good. So it needs to come from you first. And that's really what's happened, is I started to realize that I actually am a good writer, and I'm just going to get better the more I do it, fail, get better, fail upwards, as some would say, and then, be exceptional, which is what I'm trying to do, be exceptional.
Fabulous. One last question I have here for you, Andrea, is what is your personal cure for writer's block, or do you even have one?
I'm sorry, I don't have writer's block. You know what? Nina Lee Aquino said when I had taken a class with her, I think it was in, I don't even remember what year it was, 2011. It was called So You Think You Can Write a Play? And it was before I was really a playwright. And she said, I don't believe in writer's block. We all have stories inside of us. It's our fear keeping us from writing. One of the things that I do if I'm stuck on a play is I save it and start something else, like a seed of an idea, and maybe just write a little bit of something.
That's what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say maybe if you hit a wall or get stuck, as you put it, it's a good way to describe it, that you go on to something else, because you talk about having sort of multiple projects.
Yeah, I think it's important to have multiple projects, because if you have one thing and only one thing, it's going to consume you, and not in a good way. It's good to have something to just pivot to, anything.
I like it.
Yeah.
I wanted to know what you're reading right now. Can you tell us what you're reading?
I'm reading Joe Turner's Come and Gone by August Wilson.
Oh, and how are you liking it?
I'm really enjoying it. I've been reading a lot of his work lately, and his work is so multi-layered. And he is also the kind of person who gets inspired just by looking at a painting. He looks at the way a man is cradling a baby, and he's like, what is the story behind this? And then creates fences. He saw a painting of a man holding a baby and realized that's going to be a scene in Fences when Troy comes home with a baby that doesn't belong to his wife and says, you're going to raise this girl now. That's how it came up. And I'm like, that's what I mean when I talk to my students. I'm like, it doesn't have to be something grand. It can be something really, really small, and you just from there. So come up with, use the people around you. You are surrounded by stories.
I like that very much. I got a text from Grant Ramsey saying he liked the talk very much and he was going to eat pancakes. So he said to say hi.
Hey, Shrub Tuesday. I had apple buttermilk pancakes myself.
Thank you. Very nice. Hey, listen, thank you so much for taking this time to talk with me. It was so fun to kind of unfurl the threads of you and learn more about you, Andrea.
It's a quilt.
Great quilt. It's great. I can't wait to see what else emerges from you. And after we get out of the pandemic, I can't wait to come and visit you in Toronto and have some Prosecco with you.
Come and sit in my backyard. I have a big backyard, big trees. It's beautiful. Yes.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone who was watching. It was great.
Thank you so much. It was great. Thank you very